Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Words with Dani and Emily. And we are into a whole new world here where there's no other way to get together than this. And so here we are. And lots of stuff to talk about. It feels like the time, well, I guess it was a week and a half ago we did, not 2 weeks ago. So I was like, it doesn't feel like 2 weeks, but it's been a week and a half already since the last one, which was a great show. And we have a list of things we're going to get to here. But we were just chatting a little bit in the pre-show before, and I think we're going to start with the Tulsi Gabbard crap. So I just, like I saw her weird video that she made with the strangest lay I've ever seen on last week. It took her about 5 minutes in the video to get to the part that really mattered. Like all the other shit she was saying was pretty much, what is the point of this video? And then she basically said that she was dropping out and supporting Joe Biden, who she disagrees with, but she knows is a wonderful man with a good heart, who is the right person to lead us through this problem. And I was just like, ugh. Like just my stomach flipped because, for me, even though like I'm out of the politics game in terms of voting, I love to comment on it. I love watching what it's signaling and symbolizing and all that kind of stuff. But I haven't voted in 12 years and I'm not going to vote again ever. So, but I wanted to like her, you know what I mean? There was something appealing about how clearly she could speak truth to power on a number of topics, and like I wanted to think, okay, well, at least she's not a gross person. She's a gross person. My bad.
She's a gross person. I know.
Yeah, she's a gross person.
I haven't met her, but this was a really disappointing, disgusting move. Like, I heard a rumor that she tried to endorse Bernie and he wouldn't take it, which is like, he's just gross for all the reasons he's gross. And then I heard from someone who was on her campaign with her that the reason that she was endorsing Joe Biden was because she promised that she would endorse the Democratic candidate and she's a woman of her word. And so my thing is like, okay, well, if you're vying for my support for you as a leader, whether it's 2020 or 2024, then you need to show me that you are always going to defer to what's best for the country and to what's best for the whole, not this egoic idea of, well, I'm a person of my word, because this guy is clearly unfit to like lead his way out of a gas station bathroom, let alone lead a country, especially a country where it is now. Like, no one in their right mind with any integrity is going to say, yes, this is the best choice to lead our country right now. So she totally lost me, like 1,000,000%.
Well, she's endorsed somebody who has disappeared over the course of the last week. There's been, he had some little weird live stream or whatever today, but well, this is my thing. And this
is he in the ICU? Is he in a coma?
Right. Well, I think they went in to, give him the rewrite, give him the software update so he can, play out programming through the next couple of months. Whenever someone in that position like that disappears for a number of days, remember we saw it happen with Hillary last time, and we see it with celebrities. They're going back for an update on their software.
Interesting. So do you not, so Hillary's not human? Hillary's like what, full AI? Or combo? Well,
there's copies and pastes that are full AI, but the ones that we're seeing, they may be the quote unquote real person. We may get to some of this in the later part of our discussion, but their mind control, right? Their mind control there's implanted information there, like there's not any upper level politician, including Tulsi Gabbard. Robert and I did talk about that last time. That was before this happened. That isn't under a certain level of mind control for sure.
Right.
This goes to my point. Excuse me, Bert. The part of the reason I will never vote, right, is because politicians, like, they're always, if it's not anybody who wants to be a politician, pretty much, or is able to become a politician in this environment, there's something wrong with them. And the few that there aren't something wrong with, they've run them off into the hills, like Cynthia McKinney, like Dennis Kucinich, whatever, right? So, or they're dead, like James Traficant, and he wasn't perfect either, but, he stood up against Israel and, this kind of thing, right? So anyone who takes any kind of real stand that actually means something that isn't just lip service, they run them off to the hills. So, but she basically, like, my suspicion is that is the truth, that she did pledge. My suspicion is to run as to run in the Democratic Party, they make you sign a contract or an agreement that who will support or endorse the eventual nominee, because they all always end up doing that, which should be the first sign to anybody that this isn't a fair process.
Well, what would the penalty be if she flipped at the end and just what was actually a person of integrity who was able to pivot in service to capital I integrity and say, no, I'm not going to do that because it's actually wrong? Because I thought that's the type of leader she was portraying herself to be, and she clearly isn't.
Like, my feeling about this whole thing was, I think it was one thing to choose to drop out. She was clearly not going to win, and we're clearly in some new scenario of created crisis on one level or another, right? So I get that, but it was a whole other thing to endorse somebody who can't finish a sentence, right? And who is diametrically opposed to you on everything you say means a lot. So
right. Exactly.
And since she's not running for Congress again, I don't understand why she didn't take this. I think it would have been an amazing thing to say, you know what, I'm going to be a person of my word, and I said I was not going to run party, so I'm not going to a third party, so I'm not going to, but I can't say that this is a strong person to lead our country. And I would have accepted that in terms of like, okay, this is a person who their word is obviously important to them, but the other thing she says all the time that's important to her is the health of our country, and having a person with dementia as the president is not helpful.
That's the thing. It's like, if you're running to be the president of the United States, then the health of our country has to trump all the other things. You have to be able to pivot, be like, I know I said I would back the Dem nominee, but I didn't realize.
Oop, you froze. Oop, you froze for a second. Hold on, you cut out for a second. So you lost you back. I said this back then, but I didn't realize, and then you kind of went away.
Oh, I said she has to, like, I expect the leader of our country to have the ability to pivot. So yes, I made this promise, and I am a woman of my word. However, now that I have new information, that would actually be terrible for our country. And I'm going to prioritize the health of our country than what you think of me as a person. And she didn't do that.
Yeah.
What she did was really damaging for the country and for everyone who backed her for as long as they did and gave her money.
Yeah.
She let them down.
I agree. And I've watched the conversations in the sort of left side of the alternative media about this, and most people are actually pretty disgusted with it. There's a few that are making excuses for her. And some are saying, I still like her as a person, but this is not okay as a political thing or whatever. It was kind of embarrassing to watch Jimmy Dore trip over her words and not be, because he still wants to believe. Like, it's incredible to me how many people just need to believe in this system. Like, I just don't understand. Like, I can't.
Look what's going on now. I mean, I can't even believe how the people are going along. It's shocking to me.
Right. Well, yeah, like the news tells you need to buy toilet paper, so everybody goes out and buys.
The news tells you that you're supposed to treat your fellow human beings like they're infected pariahs, and you see everyone going along with that and walking around the market with masks and gloves like assholes who can't even do an internet search to figure out how viruses are actually transmitted.
Right. Yeah.
It's really simple science.
Yeah, no, it is. The level of mind control is crazy. And and just the people, like, my sister flogged me a little bit for going out to dinner last weekend. On the last night, you could still go out to dinner. She tried to pull well, now you're not going to be able to see dad, because my dad's health was compromised and stuff like that. And my sister's still a relatively new parent, and I understand that kind of thing. But it's just like, to me, like, when I go out, like now I go out to go to the grocery store, I go out to go exercise, and I'm seeing lots of children playing in the park and dogs and people out there, and that makes me happy. Like, the idea of everybody staying home doesn't make me happy. So so I think the more things that people can do to be normal, that's better for everybody.
Totally.
Yeah, but no, the Tulsi thing, it's not acceptable. Like, you know what I mean? It's not acceptable. And she's coming across in an arrogant manner that I didn't see before until now. But she just kind of feel, nope, I'm just doing what I always said I would do. So tough titties. I understand your frustration, but tough titty. Like,
yeah, it's really adolescent, right? It's like a 15-year-old teenager, like,
yeah, it is. And I think, like, I hoped this before, but you know, so I don't know if it's worth hoping again, because I don't think they'll actually do this, but the left needs to wake up to the idea that there is not a governmental solution to our problem.
Okay, that's adorable, because do you think that's going to happen? The left is under such crazy mind control. Like, there's so many steps that would require when they're so enslaved.
They're so enslaved.
It's really crazy to me.
Yeah. Like they're super enslaved. They're like, but it's weird. You're even like, this is how funny the left brain is. Not the left brain, but the brain of the people on the left is now like Jimmy Dore's kind of cheerleading Trump because he's doing socialism by considering, you know, UBI and, you know, forgiveness on things and whatever. And so like
are you talking about Nassara or something different?
No, I'm never talking about Nassara.
I just want to track. I didn't know that he was suggesting UBI.
Trump is, well, a lot of people have suggested. Tulsi was actually the first one who said everyone should get, she was suggesting $1,000 a month basic income for the duration of this coronavirus. And then Mitt Romney picked it up just as a one-time $1,000 payment. And now they're considering the Republicans and a few from like the progressive end of the left, but are considering like anywhere ranging from $1,000 to $1,500 a month as a UBI during the time where people can't work. And they're considering making it like they're delaying tax payments and all that kind of stuff. And so, but the centrist corporate Democrats are not. They just want to give money to the corporations and forget the rest of it, right? But the progressives who just went through this whole thing with Bernie and Tulsi and whatever, they're now applauding Trump because he's practicing socialism. So their need for government actually trumps their hatred of Trump. So
I applaud them for that, because that's at least making a decision based on a genuine alignment versus a mind virus. Like, thank God that's happening.
Right. So I appreciate that part of it, but it goes to what you were just saying about the level of mind control the left is under about the need for government. That as much as they've hated Trump all along, right? If he's doing something that is big government in nature, then even Trump is okay, because the need for government trumps everything else.
That sucks.
Right? Yeah. So like even, you know, like you know what I mean? So it's this weird, but that's only going to be some of those people who just can't imagine any kind of world without government will always defer to whatever keeps the system of government in place, rather than start to consider ideas that would weaken the power of the government.
I mean, do you think that within our lifetime, you are going to see your ideal version of cultural structuring, like anarchists, whatever? Like, do you think that's realistically going to happen in our lifetime?
Well, okay, so yes and no. And it's both important to me and not important to me. I don't need there to be a change in the governmental structure, the political structure of the country or the world in order for me to achieve freedom and happiness. I've figured something else out for myself. That is what we talked about a couple of shows back when I said that, like, when I used to need the rest of the world to change in order for myself to be happy, I was really frustrated all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, that need that I once felt for that is not there. Like, to me, it's interesting to watch and comment on. I find all of this quite humorous on a number of levels. I think there's obviously parts of it that are sad, but how I feel about myself is not dependent, you know, and my life and all of that kind of stuff. And then the other question about whether I'm going to see it in my lifetime or not, well, it depends on what you think life and what you think reality are, right? And what you think a natural lifespan is. So for me, I am of the belief that there are already people, but it's going to become more common amongst certain sectors of the population, for people that do not age at the same pace, that achieve certain levels of life extension or immortality, right? And so I was going to say immorality, but we're already there. There's lots of people at high levels of immorality. And I also think that there's going to be literal people who are literally figuring out how to create other worlds and other realities, pocket universes where the structure won't apply. That doesn't mean that they won't be able to transition and transcend between them, right? So this system may still exist in the same way here. So it depends on the length of life. right? You know, I can't speak what's going to be happening in a couple hundred years. Like if we assume lifespan to be to 85 or 90 or whatever, no, I don't think there's going to be no government in the way that I would find peaceful and appealing during that phase of time in this agreed upon reality that we're all in. I think there's going to start to be all sorts of branches of possibilities happening, and that's going to be the way that people who are of a certain kind of mindset are able to separate themselves from this. But I don't think this is going away, right?
That's really interesting what you just said about agreed upon reality, because never before have I experienced such a chasm in my perspective on reality and what the mainstream is shoving down our throats. Like, it's really at a crescendo, and I have no doubt that it's going to get wider and wider. But when you just said that, I saw this opening of, well, given that it seems like we're not sharing reality constructs anymore, depending upon how whatever craziness we're in continues to unfold, I just see reality shifting so drastically that maybe for those of us in our pocket universe, which is feeling more and more like a reality, that will happen. I mean, I wasn't leading anywhere with that question, but when you said that, I just saw it really. I was like, oh wait, that could actually happen very quickly.
Well, it's kind of like when you were little, right? The only, this goes back to sort of a conversation we had last time, but I'm going to expand on it. Like when you were little, the only hamburger place you really knew of like was McDonald's, right?
True.
Right. And so then at a certain point, like when you were a little bit older, like you figured out that there was like, you know, that one that was like a privately owned one, right? Like a privately owned hamburger place in your neighborhood.
Fatburger.
Well, that's not, that's a chain that's better, but it's still a chain. But there might have been like a mom and pop kind of place somewhere, or maybe you've been to like a steakhouse that served burgers. So you started to recognize that there was other things. And then like one day you found your ultimate burger, right? And so you don't go to any of those other places for burgers anymore. You just go to the place that has the burger you really like, but you're still aware of the fact that McDonald's is there. So as we create these other realities, like we'll probably create something or find something someone else has created that seems a little better. We'll go there for a while, and then we'll find a better one and a better one, or we may even create our own perfect burger or burger place. And it doesn't mean that but it's not like that means McDonald's will disappear from our reality. Like we can still drive down the street and see that McDonald's is still there, and there's still people who are in that reality where that's their only hamburger place they ever go to, but we never go there anymore. Okay, so I don't think it's going to be that this quote unquote we all still would agree that McDonald's is there. This is always going to be here, but we're going to become more and more selective, not only about the burger places we go to, but ultimately about the burgers we eat to the point that we decide, you know what, only I can make exactly the burger I like, and I'm going to invest my burger making and eating time in that. Right? But if
I hear what you're saying, and I think it's probably, I mean, there's so many question marks right now about how this is all going to go down, and there's so many possibilities, and I'm staying focused on like the most peaceful, like macro optimal timeline possible. And I could see there being ways that this unfolds where we go super underground and don't leave the underground, and therefore aren't actually driving past these proverbial McDonald's because we're invisible and we're letting that construct die its gross wheezing death as it's doing. Okay,
so I agree with you, except for you have a lot of experience in underground too. Mine is mostly from the dance music scene, right? From underground parties and raves. And I'll say this, like, even though those operate tremendously underground, and like, so most people who go to undergrounds, like for a while when they first start going to undergrounds, they might still go to something that's above board, right? Eventually they get to the place where they're only going to the underground. So they're not going to those other parties.
Right.
They still like might drive by people waiting in line for one of those as they go to the store to get water.
Right, but here's what I'm talking about, and I don't want to give this timeline too much validity, but I've been geeking out on the dollar vigilante as I'm cramming to figure out the things that I need to figure out while this is happening. And so he's painting different ways. And if they are going to be doing force vax, and it is going to be, you need to be tattooed or this or that, then I'm going to fucking disappear. I'm not going to put myself where I'm going to be in the line of sight. Do you know what I'm saying?
I understand, but for a period of time, you're still going to have things that you need from the outside. And so like, it isn't just going to be that suddenly that McDonald's or that whatever is gone. It might recede over time. I haven't paid attention to what Dollar Vigilante is doing lately because I personally don't care for him as a human being. I've watched his behavior.
I totally get why. I love it, but I get it.
He has some great people on his show. He has his Anarchast show and things like that. But I just don't care for him as an individual.
I get it.
I think he has put a very money-making spin on what should be like he's obsessed with money, right? Like he's the dollar. And I think that like everything he does comes from that space and not from a different space. And for me, that just doesn't work as someone who appeals to me. But he does have interesting things on, and he's done some interesting things and whatnot. He may be a perfectly nice person. I have not had a personal encounter with him, so I don't know. But that was just over time. I just feel like I need a shower after I listen to him. And, I don't know. I didn't like the way he treated Derek Bros. So, yeah. So,
well, to be fair, Derek Bros never returns any of my emails or contacts, even though I support him. So,
yeah,
everyone has their own shit.
No, you know what's weird? I've had Derek on the show a number of times. The last time I had him on, we had an amazing show, and he's never responded to anything from me since then. I don't know if he just completely got off track while he was running for mayor and stopped responding to the things he normally does. And I like Derek, and I think he does cool stuff, but there's a lot of his sort of narrative and his stuff that I disagree with. But I will say this, like, I do think that Derek is a well-meaning person, and he's done a lot of work to expose the stuff he did on the Finders cult, even though I don't think he went far enough in some areas, and I think he got misguided in other areas. Like from what I understand, he had a huge falling out with Jeff Berwick over this screening. He was supposed to screen that there, and Jeff made his life hard. And I think a lot of people who are involved in crypto are involved in pedophilia, and I think that made some issues for Derek there, and some things came to light, right?
Okay.
I don't like that. I don't think Derek. I think Derek is honest. I don't think he's a liar. I think he does the best he can. He's a human being like all of us. We're all.
Totally. I don't think he's a liar at all. It's clear he's well intentioned. I'm just saying, like, everyone has their shit.
Everyone has their shit. Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I completely agree. So just like the rest of us, he's an imperfect person, but I do trust Derek.
I do trust him. I do trust his intentions for sure.
Yeah, I trust Derek, and I like Derek, and there's some, just like all of us, we have some irritating aspects to our behavior, and that's
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Anyway, but I think that's the whole, like, I think we're gonna start to really have, and this is where, and maybe this is a good time to we'll maybe talk a little bit about Westworld here, even though you've never watched it, but the whole, like, the cornerstone of Westworld is this question that he asks the hosts to make sure that they're still under mind control, is, have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? So I think we are really, even though there's a lot of us who've been doing this for a long time, this point we're at now with this particular, whatever the fuck this nonsense actually is like a chance to question the nature of reality in like a much more immediate and practical way than we've ever done, right? Like, what is reality? Why is this happen? Like, what is this little code that, like, once you achieve that, it makes things roll out in a certain way? And like, let's really start, not like in a fantastic way of creating a utopia for tomorrow, but as creating like a necessity for today, play with the idea of reality creation, right?
Well, it does seem like, and admittedly, I haven't watched Westworld, but it's interesting because I had mentioned Alsette to you. I don't know how to say her last name, but her last show.
Iwaku, she's very beautiful. Yeah.
She's gorgeous and brilliant. And her last show was also talking about Westworld and how it is reality. And what I'm seeing.
It is reality. It is.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing with, and I like what you're like, whatever this is, it does seem to be like a choose your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
in an exaggerated way that I haven't seen before. Like the mind control in this, the conversation around the false flag pandemic is its own next level lexicon virus, right?
Wow.
Like I can feel it. I'm sure you can feel it as well, that any sort of talking about the mainstream narrative is so toxic. There's such an infection in it.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be, I mean, right now it's creating these realities and these worlds and these fear constructs.
I think you should watch Westworld. I think you should watch. I think for a number of reasons, because the layers are so interesting. I think you'll actually really like it. But there's also a lot of stuff in there for us. There's things that will bring stuff back, right? Like there's just some. I think you should watch it. I know you don't watch a lot of this kind of stuff, but I feel like your brain is necessary in the conversation about Westworld.
That's very flattering. My ego's all a tingle. Thank you for the recommendation. I do think we're going to see this. Like, I think the people who are taking the corporate media's narrative and swallowing it whole and then reacting accordingly, we're going to see them creating realities that parallel those worst case scenarios. And I feel like those, like a 1,000,000%.
There are people that are never going to leave their house again except for to go to the market.
Oh, I just feel like, I mean, as alienated as you've heard me say on our show so many times, I feel in this reality construct, this is just a whole new level. Like I have no understanding of the fear and the way that people are isolating from one another and treating one another like pariahs. Like there's literally no traction for me. I feel like we're on completely different planets.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it's weird. Like it's, like I agree. But it is going to change things going forward. There's people who will never go back to life, that even anything resembles what it was before, just because of the paranoia. Like whatever the paranoia program in them will have been set off, and that'll be it. The
paranoia program is so interesting because it's not just like, I'm going to isolate to protect myself, even though this is not how viruses are spread, even though the numbers don't actually indicate anything like this. But then there's the like shaming of the other people who aren't. Yeah, exactly. Like, and to such an extreme level. Like, I'm really concerned about how this mob mentality is going to continue to develop.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting to me too, the way this spreads is like, what if this is actually even just something, it's just an idea that spreads over the internet, like a virus spreads over the internet. And so it does something, it changes something in your epigenetics, right? Or some program in your DNA, so that then when you get the flu, instead of getting a normal flu, you get it with this attached corona tag on it. Like it's you know what I mean? And so now you have the coronavirus. It's a combination of a regular flu and like a malware virus like you would have on your computer.
That completely resonates.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like that resonates. And we touched on this. I know we keep saying like whatever this is, and I know we talked about it in the show, but it is like, I feel like there's so much validity in I don't even know if we're allowed to say it. I don't want to get us cut off, but in the FIVEG comparison,
right,
and the overlay of where this is showing up and how it's showing up, and like that, I've seen so many videos that really resonates and makes sense.
Right.
But then it doesn't line up with the whole, this came from Bill Gates, right, as part of his eugenics plan, and it also doesn't line up with the Q thing. So it's like there are all these narratives.
Well, I think all the noodles are at the wall, right? They're throwing everything at the wall. Like I think like something has happened, and somebody maybe threw the first one, and then someone is throwing theirs. I think there's 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 different things going on here, and I think looking for one answer is gonna keep you swinging from paradigm to paradigm without ever. So like I was just listening to something of Catherine Austin Fitz and Joseph Farrell, where they were talking about another aspect of this, and it seemed to make some sense. There's like, I'm familiar with the Bill Gates, they were talking a little bit about that, but there's all these things going on here, and it's not just one thing. I think there's probably I can see at least 5 or 6 separate narratives like, or that could be separate, but they interlace in certain ways. Like a lot of the players have investment in 2 or 3 of the narratives, but not all 6 or 7, right?
Okay.
Kind of thing. Like, I just think that like there's like, if this was like a deployed op from one particular group, right? Then someone else sees it as, I'm going to counter that with this, but I'm going to ride the same current for it. And another person is like, well, I'm not into either of these things, but both of these things give me an opportunity to do the thing I've been wanting to do, right? And so I think we're starting to see this cashing in on a crisis kind of thing happening, and it gets to a point where it's hard to deduce the chicken from the egg.
Is there any narrative that resonates with you? Like, are you leaning one way or the other as far as what you're buying into, or is it just like, who the fuck knows?
I think I'm paying the people that are making sense to me in the way they're talking about this are Catherine Austin Fitts, John Rappaport, from what I've heard from Joseph Farrell so far, and they're acknowledging about 3 or 4 different things going on: the isolation of China, the possibility, right? The Bill Gates narrative, the 5G narrative from the perspective of the larger thing, which is the making everything electronic and digitized in the Internet of Things, with 5G just being one part of that, and nanotech and the vaccine playing into that. So not that the purpose is to do 5G, but the purpose is anything that can become controllable through data and electronics. So the 5G is part of a larger narrative. It isn't the point necessarily.
But do you give validity to the thoughts that like the illnesses that we're seeing are actually a result of the 60 gigahertz frequency that's being turned on through 5G?
I don't say that's impossible, but I don't think that's the main point. If it's happening, I think it's a side effect, right? I think it's like, when I think the technological component of this in terms of 5G.
Oh shoot, you froze up a bit.
Okay.
You're back.
When I think of the 5G thing, like, I think that it's hard to say because I don't think it has uniform effect on people. I think it affects people in different states of health and whatever differently. Also, like, I think of everything as not being just what it is, but what else, like the combination of that and something else. So like maybe in certain areas there's like 5G, and also there's been a lot of chemtrailing there, or there's been some other condition going on amongst the people for like, right? So I don't see 5G as the cause of everything. I see it as like a Trojan horse for other things to ride in on and connect with. So I don't know. Like,
do you think there's a virus?
I think there's certainly a mind virus, right? I think there's something here that's obviously been created. I think that, like, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we're dealing with like a bioweapon thing, or if it's like, you know, or if it's more of like a
mental bioweapon.
A what?
A mental bioweapon.
A mental bio, right? So it's, like, for me, I just don't know. But I do think they will use whatever this is. What all the factions will use this for is to have greater access to people's data, and to have the forcing of more things become based on the Internet of Things. And people, I think they like the idea of social distancing and isolating and that kind of thing. So
that effect on our social fabric, already it's devastating, but that is going to crush us. It's so brilliant how they've engineered this, and so fast. But this social distancing, and I know this is unpopular and people want me dead for saying so, but it is horrible for us.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think the other thing that's going on here is like a lot of basic DNA, not basic, it's DNA warfare, right? Like they like right now, I think there's this opportunity where people are like, and Randy made a show about this. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to it, but I've had some conversations about it with him. And this is some things that I've been reading about as well. Like, we have the ability right now, we've had it for a while, but for some reason right now, to sort of evolve our genetics, right, like ourself, in a way that is like a massive upgrade fairly quickly. But you can't do that if you're worried about being sick.
Right.
So, or if you're worried about staying away from people, or if you're worried, like if you're distracted with, or if you're like watching, like, or if you're thinking Joe Biden is a good idea for president, like that just eliminates you from the possibility of that like massive self-induced upgrade that is available right now, right? So,
and when you talk about a massive self-induced upgrade, like what are you talking about?
Like some turning on some of the neurocircuitry in your brain and some of the systems in your body that have been dormant because of bread and circus.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That hasn't, like, you know, we haven't had enough time to be exploring our inner mind and really like our genetic library, right? Like people don't spend enough time wandering off. Like, remember when you were little, you used to daydream a lot?
Oh yeah.
I
still do.
Right, but in general, there's way less daydreaming now, because the time people would have spent daydreaming, they'd check their phone.
What's happening? I know, it's gross.
And so, like, you know, like I think daydreaming, or just like, you know, or when, you know, that kind of space you go into, like when you are having like a good massage or a cranial session where you're like not asleep but not awake, and you're like
out, you're in the liminal, you're like in between.
Yeah, you're out there on the edge, right? I think that like people don't go there anymore, and right now, because of the situation we're in, we all have a lot of free time, right? A lot more time than we normally have. You know, or someone like you who's, you know, been working for yourself and stuff, it doesn't feel as different as it does for people who are used to being out running around with their kids doing all. So there's a different, we're not spending our time with outer external stimulation. So the options are pretty much digital stimulation, or stimulating your, or daydreaming, or stimulating your, making things up, using your imagination, right? And so if you're going to take this whole time and spend it watching CNN about the coronavirus and about the presidential election and about the crashing economy, then you're going to miss this time off that we've been gifted with to rediscover your imagination.
Yeah,
I'm looking at this as a gift of time to explore your inner world.
Totally, a lot of people are saying that right now. If you
don't do that, then you're going to make this media projection that will become your inner world. Your whole life will consist of coronavirus, Joe Biden, and no money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, you know, yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at with that stuff. All right. What else are you where did you want to go next? We had 3 or 4 other things we had tossed the possibility around it. Did you want to talk about, you had your thoughts about Trump or the Q thing or whatever?
I'm into Trump right now. He makes me laugh so much with these clips that I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. And I know we've talked about Q before, about like, okay, is it ever going to happen? You've been teasing us for 2.5 years. Is this ever going to happen? It feels like it's happening. And the caveat is, even if it's not, it's the most fun narrative for me to play with right now.
Okay.
In the options, because I love the idea of him taking down the deep state and putting a stop to the gross pedophilia.
I will say, I do like that he called the Department of Justice the Deep State Department.
The Deep State Department.
That one's funny.
The best part of that, which was just like the emotion that was pouring through him when he said it, I was like, this is real. He's really trying to make this happen, because he was so, there was just so much going on there. So, so I'm geeking out on that, and I'm really like, you know, like fingers crossed, hoping that it happens. So that's, I mean, I'm obviously not tracking the mainstream news. I'm tracking the stuff that gets taken down instantly because it's about, you know, like 5G or Gates or whatever. But I am tracking a lot of the Q stuff on social media, and they're very excited that Tom Hanks allegedly has been arrested for pedophilia.
He has a typewriter.
Yeah, so Tom Hanks has a Corona typewriter in his quarantine, as does Madonna, who keeps putting out new propaganda videos every day where she mentions Bill Gates by name. She mentions Obama by name. I keep waiting for her to like grab a glass of adrenochrome and just like chug it down.
Right.
So I don't know, it's just, whether it's real or not, the energy among the Q people right now is really like hopeful and excited and happy versus like the mainstream where they're just like depressed and scared and freaked out. So it's like, okay, and as I'm dipping my toe in like whatever the mainstream is talking about, that's more interesting to me. And of course, like as we talked about the last time, it has to stop. Like it just has to stop.
So I don't know if we talked about this last time, or I think maybe I was talking about it with someone after our show. So everybody knows my feelings about the Q thing, right? But I went over and looked at some of the Q stream on Twitter just so I would know what you and Sally and whatever were sort of talking about. And like sometimes I just can't even figure out like what they're so excited about the thing about the Oprah and the Tom Hanks and whatever. And I guess here's the thing. Of course, like, we understand there's these problems in the world and something needs to happen. I think the Q thing, the issue for me is that it's predicated on this idea that these celebrities and these famous people and these politicians are going to go down. And I see that as like, whatever's this stuff with the pedophilia and all this corruption, it needs to stop. And that's the only thing that matters, is that it stops. I don't think, like, I really, somebody was asking me, do I think that they'll ever arrest the politicians or the pedophiles? And when I really sit with it, the answer to that, I think, is no. I think that
they have tens and thousands of sealed indictments at the ready, and the process to get those.
Whoops! Oh, you froze up.
Is not nothing. That's like indicates years.
Right. You froze up for a second.
The fact that there are that many sealed indictments indicates years of really intense work to bring these people down.
Okay, so this is what I think. So I do think that Trump, and there are people who are committed to ending human trafficking, and I do think that there's been a lot of arrests that have happened along those pipelines in order to make it stop. I don't think these big celebrities and people at the top of the heap, I don't think that they're going to be arrested. I think but to me, what's important is that it stops. Right. And so I think like they're going to be put on timeout per se in some ways, but I don't think they're going to be arrested. And I think making that the point that, ooh, yippee, they're going to arrest, I think that's a distraction. I think the focus should be on making it stop. And that's what I care about. Like, I like the corruption, the criminality needs to stop. And whatever happens to the people who did it, I actually am much less concerned about that than about the fact that it stops. One of the things that when I was listening to, and I'm going to recommend that I'm not going to go too far into it because Catherine Austin Fitz does have, a paywall that her stuff is behind, and her information is great. It's a little bit expensive, but I recommend that if people can afford it, they subscribe to her stuff. It's a different perspective than some others. She comes from a very system-oriented, very financial background, but she knows a lot of stuff. Somebody shares it, lets me hear occasional things because it's a little out of my pay situation right now to be part of it, but I've long been a fan of hers.
Can I just interrupt to offer a languaging upgrade?
Sure.
Instead of if people can afford it.
If people are budgeted for it, yes.
You get the quantum languaging brownie button. Thank you.
All right. Right now, that's not what I'm budgeted for. That's not how I'm choosing to spend my budget. Fortunately,
yes.
People share clips with me, and so in turn, I recommend that people listen to Catherine Austin Fitz because I think she's very smart. I think she's telling the truth. I don't have the same worldview going forward in terms of what I'm looking for as what she is looking for, but I think she gives us important information about what's happening. So she and Joseph were talking about these because there are indictments and arrests and all of these things happening. What they were saying, and this makes more sense to me, is that those arrests, those warrants are for the drug cartels. And that part of the reason for one of the agendas behind this virus is to get people off the street while they're cleaning out house and pulling these cartels. Like there's already been, I guess, 600 arrests that have happened of major cartel players and many more indictments and things pending. And that it's really about that. And that is also connected to the human trafficking pipelines. The pipelines travel along the same thing. To me, that makes more sense than that they're going to arrest all the politicians and the celebrities.
I hear that, and I think it's an and. Like, I get that there's crossover between the drug cartels and the human trafficking, and, you know, from what I'm tracking, and who knows, it's all of it. The reason that I'm rooting for the Q story is because I don't want the globalists to get their way. I don't want it to turn into forced vaccination, one world government, one currency. And in my mind, yes, of course I want the pedophilia and the human trafficking stopped, but it also seems like Trump is the only hope in the scenarios that we're discussing here to put a stop to that. You know, like everyone's talking about the pandemic, and it's like, no, it is this giant behind the scenes war between the globalists and the Soros and the traffickers and the vax and the UN, you know, Agenda 2020 and 2030 and all that, or Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 versus like Trump, and then the wild card of the hope that a lot of people have for what that might be. Right. And we don't really know. But for me, and I've always said this, like the vax thing is something that I'm really not down with. And it does feel like Trump clamping down on this is a great way for it not to necessarily happen.
So I get what you're saying. I see it as that, okay, Trump is Trump. Part of the reason I don't see him ever bringing down celebrities and elites and whatever, because he is really part of that class. But I do think, this is my opinion, I don't think he likes drugs, and I don't think he likes human trafficking. So I think he's trying to put a stop to that. I don't think he does have some authoritarian tendencies, that amounts of governmental control. I don't think he's so obsessed with the idea of vaccines and some of these other kinds of controls, but I do think he likes the idea of monitoring people and being able, you know, I do think, so I don't know that, like, hoping that he's going to help us with like a 5G situation or whatever. I don't know that that's it, but
I don't know his stance on 5G. Yeah. That's confusing.
And his stance on vaccines is confusing. Like
he's anti-vax.
Sort of, but not strongly enough, in my opinion, if he were really anti-vax.
Well, I feel like he's strategic about it. Like, I feel like I feel like his thing has been to take down the media first before he could go hardcore against it. But he did, by executive order, outlaw mandatory vax for government employees. And that's a big deal that no one gives him credit for.
I agree. No, I agree with you about that. And I was aware of that. But this is kind of what I see. If you stop if you're able to stop the drug and the human trafficking pipelines, right? Like, and again, this is not me being against drugs. I think people should be able to do whatever they want with their body. But I think when you have drugs be illegal, it creates this underground cartel situation that creates this stuff. I think part of the reason there is that there's all this need for 5G, need for vax, need for this, blah, 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 is to have everything available to surveil, so you can keep track of who knows about the drugs and who knows about the child trafficking. That's what it's really for. So I think the taking down of those systems, the removing the ability to do that, will lessen the desire or the immediate desire that some of these people have to enforce so much surveillance and control. Like, they don't care about your health. They just want something in you so they can monitor you.
Correct. Like anyone who thinks that the CDC gives a fuck about our health is outer limits.
So if the thing that they're wanting, like the criminality that they're interested in committing, becomes less able to be committed, and so then they have less desire to try and do things to keep people from knowing about it or to hide it from them. So but I don't see like how, like, the Q narrative isn't necessary for any of that. If those things are happening, right? Like if nothing else happens from Trump's presidency, right? If nothing else happens other than like the drug pipelines and the human trafficking pipelines are reduced by 50 to 75%, right, then for me, that will have been something successful happening, and I'll credit him for that, right? And the more like, that's the thing, the corruption, particularly around the pedophilia, is the thing that has allowed all of the other corruptions to happen, because it's the thing they use for the blackmail.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
once that tool is taken away, or it's a lot harder to use, then a lot of this other kinds of stuff that is about desiring control over people's whereabouts and information is probably going to lessen. There's always going to be greedy fucks who want to make all the money, so they're going to be doing things like, I don't think Trump is ever like, if he sees that like 5G is good for somebody to make money or for certain kinds of things, he's probably never going to stand up against that, right? Especially if he has friends in Israel who are making money off of these things and all that kind of stuff. He's a businessman.
Correct.
But I think that like the desire to surveil comes from the fear of people finding out about your criminality. So all that matters is that there's a reduction in some of that kind of criminality. And however that happens is great, right? Like, I don't know.
There's so much momentum. Like, this has been in the works for a really long time. I mean, go back to Project for a New American Century.
Right.
And then Agenda 21 and then Agenda 2030. This is the event that they have been waiting for and building up to for decades and decades. So they have a goal and they have an aim. So the way that I'm seeing it, and yes, it's not stated in Q. They don't talk about him stopping vax and stopping the UN. They're not talking about any of that.
All
but from my lens, it seems like
pedophiles and politicians.
Say it again?
It seems to me like the thing Q is most concerned about is arresting pedophiles and politicians.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, so I'm adding on to the Q thing of like why I'm rooting for Trump to be a good guy is because he seems like the only chance we have right now to stand up to the momentum behind the ability for this crisis to drop us in to all of their gross plans.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, I understand that. I get it. And I guess for me, it's just like the only thing that will protect us from their gross plans is the change of behavior of the human beings. Like, there's not going to be a leader to save us from that.
I get it. And I know, like, trust me, like, I see myself pulling for this. And there's another aspect of me that's like, there are no heroes. Like, that's not how this game works. And as I'm still a human being who is still driven by narrative, which is, in all of our DNA, and we want good to win, like, and because this is something I've been tracking, as have you, for 20 years, and that it's so close, I am still pulling for the idealistic miracle solution that he's going to swoop in and stop it. And I know that is naive and idealistic. Like, I totally get that. But that is part of why I'm pulling for Q to be right. And I know they're not talking about it, but that's what I've tacked on to it.
No, you're right. Humans love narratives, so you have to watch Westworld, because it completely talks about how we're driven by our narrative, and all of our narratives have a cornerstone. But what's interesting in Westworld is like, okay, so just like there's a narrative that even though there are no heroes, you still kind of like this narrative and you want to root for that.
Right.
It happens in Westworld, and like the person that you liked suddenly does something and you're like, fuck, but I liked her, but now she did that. Now I don't like her. And the other way around, the person who seemed like a bitch and like didn't have value for life, suddenly they're doing something heroic. And so like, I think the point is that human beings are capable of everything along that spectrum, right? And so I think the thing, rather than like rooting for like a savior or a story, is just to like, go for, like, root for the behavioral changes, root for the
right. But we're up against time right now, because they are already setting up vaccination stations in Los Angeles in the parking lots. Denmark has already declared that they're mandatory and you're going to get fined if not. So there is a momentum behind this. So I hear what you're saying and I agree with you about behavior change, but like, we actually need something to stop this. Like, we don't have time to wait for humans to evolve.
I understand what you're saying, but there's also part of the reason that there is this ramping up and this thing where they feel like they have to mandate instead of just allow, people to if they want to, is because they know that that there's a lot of people starting to resist this. So this moment where they're saying, you know, mandate or you're going to be a fine, like this is where the behavioral changes. If all the people in Denmark said, fuck it, we'll pay the fine. Right? Like, or you know what, we're not doing it, and we're all not doing it, and we're all not paying the fine, go fuck yourself.
Right, but you, like me, are witnessing our fellow humans act like brain-dead sheep morons right now.
Yeah.
So that's a lovely idea that everyone in Denmark is going to be like, no, go fuck yourself and your vaccines. But like, I'm witnessing people around me who I thought were way smarter and way more free-thinking act like total dumbasses right now. So
yes.
I don't have a lot of faith in that vision. I really want to be wrong.
I think it's a wonderful service that's been performed for you, because now you know they're a dumbass and you're not confused anymore.
I'm not confused at all.
Right? So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So, I don't know. I think that just, yeah, we'll have to just wait and see what happens. And just
think I should watch Westworld. I get it.
I definitely think you should watch Westworld. Yeah, no, I used to think Burning Man was Westworld, and it definitely is. But now I realize, no, they just want us to think Burning Man is Westworld so that we don't think everything else is, when the truth is that everything is Westworld. Yeah.
All right. I'll have to tap in so at least I can know what you're talking about when you make references like that.
But it's so stocked full of shit that will inform you about things that you'll see, you'll make connections. Like they'll just be like, yeah, but there's some dark shit, so I'm warning you about that. But it's good. It's JJ.
I'm meditating on this. I'm not agreeing to it. I'm just meditating.
Fine.
I'm enjoying my conscious being free.
I don't need you to agree to my, you know, to my terms here.
Thank you.
All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit with you about. I've been making a series of videos kind of as I go along in this carnivore experience, and I'm taking.
Oh, right.
So what I'm doing is, instead of just updating on the carnivore experience, I'm going through and talking about every diet I've ever done.
Yeah.
And, right. Not in a comparison, but just using this time where I'm having this experience to reflect on the other things that I've done. Right. And so I'll, you know, also so understand where I'm coming from when I say the things I do in my nutritional role. Right. You know, it comes from experience with various things, you know, and there's some diets I find more helpful and useful than others, but I have experience with all of them, right? And now I'm having this experience with the carnivore diet. But the vegan diet was the only one where I may make an agenda video based on the paleo and the keto and some others as well. But the vegan diet, which I think is separate from the vegan agenda, right? Like a diet is just a diet. A diet doesn't have politics all wrapped up in it, but a movement around a diet does. And like this thing with the vegans is just crazy.
Getting water, but I'm listening.
Yeah. The thing with the vegans is just crazy. Like it seems to be like that they, you know, there's like a politicization or like a religion around not just how they feel about their diet, what they're eating, but how they proselytize to people or they shame people.
Crazy. Have you seen Moby's new tattoos about this?
No.
Oh my God, they're like crazy. Like it's that proselytizing, like really big on his arms. Animal rights, something crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's just so I talked about that. Of course, you know, I've gotten some comments from people who are vegans about, you know, this is the thing. Right? Like a person has the right to feel good and healthy in their body, right? And the decision they make about how to attain that is a personal decision, right? And I've not seen anybody other than vegans come in and ask the person to explain their morality, to say, you know, ask people, how can you complain about how humans are treated and then you're treating animals, or people, you know, like Randy's, the guy, Shmuel Asher, that Randy's done shows with. He's a hidden parts of the Torah scholar guy. He's very interesting, but, you know, he's a vegetarian. He's not a vegan, but, you know, I had a conversation with him once where he explained my feeling better on, when I eat meat as being, well, of course, you always feel better when you're, you know, sacrificing and taking the blood of another. And I'm just like, I don't, that just no, I was a vegetarian for 15 years. I understand that impulse, and I was a vegan for 2. I understand that impulse, and I would never have done those things if I didn't have some level of feelings. But when a person is making a decision like, I don't feel good when I do this, even though my mind likes that, and when I take care of myself this other way, I'm able to thrive in all the other areas of my life that I wasn't able to. It's a personal decision how you're going to navigate that. And I don't see any other groups of people attacking people based on their morals and their quality as a human being like I do with vegans. I'm just, sometimes it makes me wonder if the diet brings out a psychosis, right? Or what it is. Like, is there some latent thing that happens when you don't have a certain kind of fat or a certain kind of nutrient that makes you belligerent? Or is it just the way that the media and the politics have spun it and created this sort of same kind of racket you get with SJWs? It's like an SJWs.
Yeah, it's a virtue signaling. Yeah, so it's a few things. Because one, I've been vegan a million times and that hasn't happened. I don't think there's something like inherent in the lack of animal product that renders you like judgy and self-righteous and mean. It's a weird thing. It's similar to like the anti-abortionists. It's like, okay, if you don't want to have an abortion, don't have one. But then to tell everyone what they need to do, right. I feel like it's a similar thing. And it's like, yes, we can all agree that the industrial flesh world is gross, like the way that they treat chickens or whatnot. Like, we all get that. Yeah. So I can understand why the animal rights activists could have a stick up their ass about it. But the vegans and wanting to police everyone else's diet, yeah, it is its own extreme form of like righteous indignation and then like violent abuse towards others. Because it's not like, well, this is my choice and I respect your choice. It's like, this is my choice and you should die for making a different choice. When I wrote an article years ago called Why I'm Vegan-ish. And it was like my story of how I'd been vegan for so many years. And then because of different health reasons, just like started to incorporate different things for my own well-being. And the tweets that I got, and it wasn't just like, I disagree, or you're dumb, or you're an alt-right Nazi like I get now. It was like, you should die. Like, it was a very specific form of like violence and a dehumanizing, like I shouldn't even be here, that came from the vegans, that was very notable as compared to the other brands of hate right. that I've experienced. And what's weird about it, I mean, there's so many things that are weird about it, like the crazy violent judginess that comes from them. But it's like, okay, are tigers inherently evil?
Yeah.
Like, are other omnivorous species? Like, we live in a cruel world, and we are mammals, and we have molars for a reason. And if you decide that you don't want to eat meat because it doesn't jive with your ideas of compassion or politics or industry, cool. That is beautiful. But to like, you know, as you were telling me, these people going after you, and like, and what's weird with the vegans is like, they won't let it go. It's not just like, well, I don't agree with you, so I'm going to go live my life. It's like, no, why? And how do you live with yourself? And you need to explain yourself. And it's this weird, like, maybe they just don't have enough going on with their lives. I see a lot of people picking up the like veganism, animal rights thing because their lives are boring. And they don't really have a community, and they want some sort of like cool identity construct to you know, put on like a sweater that's going to give them social currency.
Yeah.
I mean, I also, like, I've seen it when the Cafe Gratitude people, there was something that happened a few years ago where it came out that the owners were eating meat, or it might have even been dairy, like nothing like that. And there were protests that like threatened to shut down their business. Like, the vegans were so angry at them, and that they really wanted to like destroy them.
Yeah.
For their own personal choices.
I do, you know, it is an interesting phenomenon. A lot of these people who are the vegan proselytizers on YouTube, they get caught eating meat, and it's kind of funny when they get caught, right? But no, like it is. So I've known Dani for a long time, and you're you on and off vegan, you mostly vegan most of the time, you don't do any of that stuff. So yeah, you don't. You judge people based on something totally else. I'm kidding.
I judge people based on their access to their critical thinking skills, and whether they're making their own decisions for themselves or they're just parroting their indoctrination. Yeah. That's where I'm getting hung up these days.
But it's also, what's so interesting, what I think they don't understand, a lot of them, is they think they're thinking for themselves, but this idea that like you should have more compassion for animals or other species than you have for your own self or your own well-being plays right into all of these Agenda 2030, all this kind of stuff.
Really?
Like, that's kind of weird. It's also interesting to look at like the political divide that happens based on this. Like, I don't know any SJWs that are carnivores, and I don't know any right-wing thinkers that are vegans. So I'm starting to look at that, which I think is kind of interesting.
Well, there's also the vegan agenda that Adam Schiff is a vegan, and that you've done all this research about how, like, for the 5G thing, they want people to be vegans.
Yep. So there's that. And then I wanted to say, there was something that you brought up just a second ago that I thought was interesting, and I just lost my, do tigers, are tigers evil? But also, a lot of people, like, we are well aware now also that plants have consciousness, right? Like, you get the entire, endless Akashic record of information every time you do mushrooms, right? So it's like, is it evil to eat plants, right? Like, somebody left a comment in the comment section about how, like, they've been through all these different diets, and each time they go through a diet, they get to this moral thing. And if you start dicing it up, like, long enough, you can get to the point where you feel bad about eating anything you're eating, because everything was alive and everything has a right to exist. And you know what I mean? And so is it just that, like, the humans sacrifice themselves so that every other form of life can go on? You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy.
If that were the case, like, let's say that were the case, right? Like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice and I'm just going to be a breatharian because that's how much I love and value life. Then why are vegans mean to people who aren't vegans?
Yeah.
Why do they care? They're so compassionate and they're so kind, except for to people who aren't living the way they feel like they should be living. So you have more compassion for an animal you've never met than your friend Emily who's making.
Oops, you froze up.
I'm not into that.
You froze up for a second, but I think got where you were going. Well, yeah, and it's kind of like the people who promote tolerance have tolerance for everybody except for people who aren't as tolerant as them, right? And so it's like, it's the same sort of circle jerk, right? Like, where at the end of the day, it's impossible to live up to the standards that they set for themselves. And so, yeah.
That's what I find is so funny, is just that mirror of the hypocrisy of, like, wow, you're such a compassionate being, and look how mean you're being to people who you judge not as compassionate as you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Anything else? I think we've hit on a lot of stuff. We've been going for a while here. Anything else you want to get to, or we'll save everything else for next time?
Yeah, well, let's see what happens in the sham show in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're signing off. Dani, I know you announced something new on your Facebook or whatever today. You want to tell people about it?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing, just because of all the mishigas going on, I'm doing 20-minute sessions for $20. So if you just want a real quick taste of transformational coaching, quantum languaging coaching, message me privately for this week. 20 minutes, $20. They're super fun, super effective, I promise.
Absolutely. And I am also offering deep discounts on my nutritional and life coaching services right now, because I think, like, it would be amazing if people could use this time to, like, get happy, get healthy, like, just totally be beyond this whatever nonsense paradigm it is by the time that this is over or whatever happens. So hit me up if you're interested in nutritional consultation or some life coaching. Check out Conspiracy Cocktail on Facebook. We had the first one this weekend. It was awesome. Another one happening this weekend. And I will be starting a kind of health and wellness discussion group for this period of time as well. So stay tuned for that. Check me out on Off Planet Media, Off Planet Radio, Matrix Mash, all that jazz. We will see you guys next time.
Bye.